It doesn't always look like loneliness. In fact, from the outside, it can look like peace. You cancel plans without guilt. You sit in silence without reaching for your phone. You walk through crowded places feeling strangely untouched, like you're there, but not really part of it. And when people ask why you spend so much time alone, you don't always have a clear answer. You just know it feels easier, quieter, safer. But here's the paradox most people don't understand. People who prefer to be alone aren't always trying to escape others. Sometimes they're trying to return to themselves. And the more life overwhelms them, the more that quiet space begins to feel like the only place where everything makes sense. There's a common assumption in society. If you spend a lot of time alone, something must be wrong. People label it quickly: shy, antisocial, detached. But that interpretation misses something deeper. Because preferring solitude isn't always about avoiding people. It's often about avoiding noise. Not just external noise, but internal noise, too. For some people, social environments don't feel energizing. They feel overwhelming. Every conversation requires attention. Every interaction carries subtle emotional weight. You're not just listening to words. You're reading tone, noticing pauses, sensing what isn't being said. And over time, that constant awareness becomes exhausting. So you step back. Not because you dislike people, but because your mind needs space to breathe. For many, this preference didn't appear overnight. It was learned. Maybe there were moments when being open led to disappointment. Times when you felt misunderstood or unseen. Times when connection felt inconsistent, unpredictable, or draining. And slowly, without even realizing it, your brain adapted. It started associating solitude with relief, with control, with emotional safety. Because when you're alone, there are no mixed signals, no expectations to meet, no need to explain yourself. You don't have to perform. You don't have to filter your thoughts. You don't have to wonder how you're being perceived. You can just exist. And psychologically, that matters more than people realize. Because the human mind doesn't just seek connection. It seeks safety within connection. And when that safety feels uncertain, solitude begins to feel like the more stable option. But something else happens when you spend more time alone. Your inner world becomes louder. Not in a chaotic way, but in a deeper, more detailed way. You start noticing your own thoughts more clearly, reflecting more often, replaying moments, questioning things others move past without a second thought. And this creates a kind of internal richness. You don't just experience life. You analyze it. You interpret it. You try to understand it. But that depth comes with a trade-off. Because while others find distraction in constant interaction, you find yourself sitting with everything. Your emotions, your memories, your questions. And sometimes that quiet space feels peaceful. But other times, it feels heavy. From the outside, it can look like distance, like disinterest. But internally, it's often the opposite. There is a lot happening beneath the surface. People who prefer to be alone are rarely empty. They are usually full, just not outwardly expressive. Every interaction leaves an imprint. Every conversation lingers longer than it should. Every small detail gets processed, stored, and revisited. And because of that, socializing isn't just an activity. It's an emotional investment, one that doesn't always feel balanced. So over time, you begin to protect your energy more carefully. You become selective, not out of arrogance, but out of awareness. You notice when something feels forced. You sense when a connection lacks depth. You feel when your presence is tolerated instead of valued. And instead of forcing yourself to stay, you quietly step away. Not dramatically, not loudly, just gradually. There's an important distinction here, one that most people overlook. Being alone and feeling alone are not the same thing. Some people feel deeply lonely in crowded rooms. Others feel completely at ease in solitude. And for those who prefer being alone, solitude often feels like clarity. It's where your thoughts organize themselves, where your emotions settle, where your identity feels most stable. Because when you're alone, you're not comparing yourself. You're not adjusting your behavior. You're not trying to fit into anything. You're simply yourself. And psychologically, that creates a sense of alignment. But here's the quiet truth. Even people who are comfortable being alone still experience moments of loneliness. They just experience it differently. Not as a constant emptiness, but as a sudden awareness. A moment where you realize you don't have someone to share a thought with. A moment where silence feels slightly heavier than usual. And then, just as quickly, it passes. Another pattern begins to form over time. You start seeing things more clearly. You notice how conversations repeat themselves, how people say one thing but mean another, how connections can feel temporary even when they seem strong. And once you see that clearly, it becomes harder to engage the same way. Because your mind doesn't just accept things at face value anymore. It questions. It analyzes. It looks beneath the surface. And that kind of awareness changes your relationship with people. You don't crave constant interaction. You crave meaningful interaction. But meaningful connection is rare. And rarity creates distance. Not because you're pushing people away, but because you're no longer willing to settle for what doesn't feel real. At some point, this preference becomes part of your identity. You stop forcing yourself into environments that drain you. You stop chasing connections that don't resonate. You stop explaining why you enjoy your own company. And instead, you begin to accept it. But acceptance doesn't mean there are no questions. Sometimes you still wonder, is this independence? Or is this avoidance? Is this peace? Or is this protection? And that question doesn't always have a clear answer, because often it's both. Over time, something subtle happens. What started as a preference begins to feel like who you are. You're the one who doesn't text first, the one who leaves early, the one who enjoys being alone a little more than others understand. And eventually, people stop questioning it. They expect it. But internally, it's more complex than that. Because even if you've grown comfortable in your solitude, there are still moments when you feel the absence of something. Not noise, not distraction, but connection. Not the kind that drains you, but the kind that understands you without needing explanation. There's a quiet fear that sometimes lives beneath this lifestyle. Not always, but often enough to matter. The fear of being misunderstood again. The fear of investing in the wrong people. The fear of losing your sense of self in connections that don't feel stable. So you choose carefully. Sometimes too carefully. You build walls that don't look like walls. Boundaries that don't feel like boundaries. And from the outside, it looks like strength. But from the inside, it's often protection. Because when you've experienced inconsistency, you start valuing control. And solitude offers that control. But here's something important. Preferring to be alone is not a flaw. It's not something to fix. It's a signal that your mind values depth over noise, clarity over chaos. Meaning over constant interaction. It means you're selective. It means you're aware. It means you're not willing to trade your inner peace for surface-level connection. And in a world that moves fast, that kind of awareness is rare. But there's a difference between choosing solitude and hiding inside it. One is alignment. The other is avoidance. And the line between them is quiet, almost invisible. The goal isn't to become more social, and it's not to isolate yourself completely either. It's to find balance, to understand that solitude can be a place of restoration, but not a permanent escape, to allow connection without forcing it, to open slowly without losing yourself. Because the truth is, you don't prefer being alone because you don't need people. You prefer being alone because you haven't found enough people who feel right. And that's a very different story. At the end of all this, there's something worth remembering. You are not distant. You are discerning. You are not cold. You are careful. You are not disconnected. You are selective about where you place your energy. And the space you've created for yourself is not emptiness. It's clarity. A place where you can hear your own thoughts, feel your own emotions, understand your own direction. And maybe, one day, someone will enter that space quietly, not to disrupt it, but to understand it, not to fill the silence, but to share it. And when that happens, you won't have to choose between solitude and connection, because for the first time, they will feel the same.